We'll go ahead and call the meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission to order for today's date, August 15th. I'm acting as chair since our chairman is not here yet. Do we have a quorum then?
Yes, we do.
Okay, all right. So first on our agenda is the approval of tonight's agenda. Any additions to that? Hearing none, is there a motion for approval?
A motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Agenda has been approved. Next, we have approval of minutes from the July 18th regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion for approval?
I'll approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes have been approved. No more oral presentations tonight?
Not that I'm
Okay.
aware of.
Well, then we'll go ahead and move on into our hearings. First hearing is a request by Timothy Clark for a certificate of appropriateness to allow for vinyl siding on a rear portion of the home at 136 Prospect Avenue. Lexi, can you give the staff report first?
Yes, I can. One moment. Timothy Clark is requesting a certificate of appropriateness to replace existing wood siding with vinyl siding. The house is rated as a C structure for architectural significance and is listed as individually eligible for the National Register. 136 Prospect Avenue is listed as contributing to the district for historical significance. And the applicant is requesting to replace a portion of wood siding on the rear part of the home with vinyl siding. The applicant has indicated the color will not change from the original color. And you guys can read through the design guidelines that are included in that staff report.
Should I explain anything? Or?
Yeah, if you
Okay.
want.
So it's just about a fifth of the house total. The rest of it's stucco. It's literally, it's really old wood and it's bulging and there's holes in different parts of it. I've gotten different quotes. It's on the cost. It'll be over $15,000 to replace it with wood. It'll be just about $7,000 to replace it with vinyl. And that just makes it much more affordable for me. No one will see it from the street. It's completely blocked from view and it's just a small portion of the house.
Any questions or comments from the commission?
So you're deciding just to go ahead and do the back part of it?
That's the
And-
only part that's wood. Yeah.
That's wood?
Yeah,
Oh.
that's the only wood part. Yeah.
The rest of it's all vinyl?
It's all stucco.
Oh, stucco.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So that won't change at all.
Is that back part original to the building?
I'm not aware of that. I don't know. But I do know that the best I can do right now is a temporary replacement, which I've got somebody lined up to do something to it's real, there's a bee infestation in the siding. So it's kind of costly to do everything. It would be about $900 to just get the bees out and batten the boards flat without changing anything. And that'll only hold up for a couple years. And then it'll be another $15,000 to replace it a few years down the line. Or I could just replace just that side of the wall with vinyl for $2,000, and then try to work around to the other sides as I save up more money. I just need approval for that.
Any other questions, comments?
So this is the one, your house is on the alley, correct? Right across
Yeah, it's
from
on an yeah.
Lee Bird's house? I believe you're
Yeah,
Kate
Lee.
Ward from
Yeah,
Ryan.
yeah.
Yep. So what he's talking about, none of it faces the street at all. It's all alley facing,
Yeah,
if I'm familiar with.
that's correct, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And obviously it would improve the looks of the house, even from the back. You know, somebody did go down the alley, at least it would improve the look of the house.
Yeah, it definitely would improve the look of the house because right now the wood's not in great shape.
Anybody else?
Lexi's gonna try to bring the house up
Okay.
on the screen so you can see it.
Just to that gate. To that gate right there. There you go. Laned around.
There you go.
Did you say you got several different bids for the replacement?
Yeah, I got several bids. The wood was the one that was twice as much all around. Some people won't even do wood siding anymore, and so it's a specialty item. It makes it much more expensive.
How about the fiber cement? Did you get that quote?
The what?
Like fiber cement board or cement board or the.
No one offered that. They only offered vinyl. At least the contractors that I talked to.
Like, I'll just keep reading it. I read the entire time.
So what you're seeing is the front, and all that would stay the same. No change.
So there's like an alley that runs behind.
So there's a T alley right there. So between his house there, that's an alley that runs all the way to Alta Vista.
Yeah.
And then there's an alley that runs between Alta Vista and Prospect to Steely.
That's right.
So there's not a property that borders his on the back until after the alley.
Yep. So as you can see, it's all fairly enclosed houses and trees.
Probably the only people that would ever see it is probably myself, since I live kitty corner from him, and the house that's on Alta Vista.
You have no objections for it?
Oh, big man spot. Well, I don't like the use of vinyl. In this instance with this case, because it's on the back of the structure, not facing anything that's out, and with the cost prohibitiveness of it, I am inclined to say yes. We all know my dislike for vinyl, so that hurts me a little bit. Not on you. But yeah, I think where it's at, I think it's going to be okay. If it was a different class of structure, I think it would be a different conversation if it was a B or an A. However, I'd be concerned about how this will affect its status as being eligible for the National Registry.
Yes, that was why the one question I had was whether that was an addition on the back or original to the structure or not.
You know, I've looked up some of the house, and I can't tell if there's been an addition or not. It was built in 1926 by the Millers, but I don't have the answer to those questions. I'm sorry.
Have we allowed vinyl out there before?
But most of the vinyl requests that we've ever had are for the entirety of the house. Usually, if vinyl has been approved, it's been on the outskirts of the actual district. There's a few houses that have had vinyl put on, but it's come before us, but it actually kind of didn't need to because it's outside of the district, actually, the way that is the footprint of it. So there's not any precedence for us to be able to fall back on as far as that goes. None of those structures were rated, if I'm not mistaken.
It's probably true.
So our hesitation really has nothing, just to put that out there, it has nothing to do with your property or anything like that. We just don't want to create a precedence within that district that we're allowing vinyl siding, because that district is very important to, the neighborhood as a whole and the city. So that's kind of why we're kind of going back and forth on that, not just to put that out there clearly for you.
Thank you. Yeah. And I wouldn't want to set a precedent, but I feel it may be unlikely that other people will have dual siding structures. So maybe making the exception because it's a dual siding, it's stucco and wood, and the wood is only in the rear.
That's why I really think it has to be part of an addition at some point, because his entire house is stuck almost the entire way around.
Yeah.
You put it back up there.
That's just the front.
Yeah, I know, but I kind of like to see that again. Kind of makes me feel the same way that there was adding on the back at some point. Like you said, everything else in the front, all
Yeah, it's all stucco.
stucco. Mm-hmm. So, any other opinion?
That's a tough one.
Yeah,
It's just kind of hard for us to decide.
would you entertain a bid for a fiberboard instead?
Depends on if I can afford it. Just
Yeah,
if I can
based
afford
on, I mean, just as another comparison, I guess.
it. Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility. As long as I don't, just the wood's super expensive. Nobody does it. So
Right.
yeah. I mean, I could. Yeah.
I think I like that too.
You
Just
can
give us an idea.
at least investigate it and see what that cost is compared to the vinyl. I'm afraid it might still be a little bit more, but I would think it'd be less than the wood.
Okay.
I would agree.
Okay.
Can we have them come back?
Um,
Fix the-
Well, I guess to a point where we can entertain a motion.
Or we table this one
Or-
and ask
well-
him to come back in a month once he has the
Yeah, the bin?
fiberboard.
That would be a motion.
Yep.
So,
Okay. I second that.
Oh. I'll make the motion to go ahead and table the certificate of appropriateness for 1 month, so the resident can get a quote for fiberboard replacement.
Okay, I second.
you have a second? Final chance for comments or questions?
Just a question. If the fiberboard is, is there like a limit on how much more it can cost for you to entertain vinyl as an option, or, what do you think there?
We'd have to see
Yeah,
the
yeah,
proposal, I
yeah.
think, before
Well,
we can.
If I could maybe send out an email with some of this material, would that help you guys think it over in the meantime in the month?
Yes. Yeah, I
Yes,
mean, if you
that
could-
always helps. Yep.
Yeah,
yeah,
More
yeah.
information is always better.
Okay,
Yeah,
can I send
definitely
that
more.
to somebody, or how do I?
You
get
can, yeah, you can send it to my email.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay. With that being said,
Your email?
It's listed on the website, but it's Lexi.Schneider,
And how you spell that?
SCHNEIDER at Waterloo-IA.org.
Okay.
any other questions or comments then? We have a motion on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you for,
Okay, thanks for your help.
You-
I'll be in touch.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will guess I can turn now back over to our chairman since he has arrived.
Appreciate that. Apologies for my my tardiness, but I'm really excited to be here. Thank you today. Ed, where are we in our agenda?
We just finished with the first hearing.
Okay.
So we're up to the Civil Rights History Study.
Awesome. Do we want to go ahead and move forward on the hearings? 'Cause then I'll get to some final reports before we end here. I have Thomas Zahn, and I would say.
Yeah, that would be our next
Yep.
on our agenda.
Yeah, let's do that, Tom. Tom, would you like to go ahead and approach and tell us a lot about the hard work that you've been doing?
Yes, I guess we'll probably, since people are gonna be coming up from the team.
Okay.
Just like working for paper and the screen, but, let me, introduce the team again. It's been a while since we've, sorry, I'll get it, thanks. It's been a while since we've been back here, but we have been back here, but we've been in the field most of the time. I want to introduce Bethany Gladhill, who worked on the research and survey portion of the report, and Patrick Rohn, right here, who was helped with the survey area. Micah Anders, who with Gar Peterson worked on research for the historic markers, and myself. one of the things I wanted to do in putting together this presentation was give you some idea of the sites that we selected for the survey sites. We needed to do 8 according to the contract, and 7 of those were in the Northwest Triangle survey area surrounding that area. You can see they're actually all outside of the survey area. Survey area that you have is the darker area in the center of the screen. And the sites, I'm going to go through each one of the sites and give you a little bit of information about it and why it was selected. The KBBG radio site is the Porter House on Cottage, I think it is, Cottage. The Full Love School of Music and the Fields House, which are Milton Fields House, are right beside each other on Sumner. The Treadwell Tourist Home, which is part of the Green Book series, was up on Cottage as well, or Cottage, or Beach. I'm sorry, it's on the corner of Cottage and Beach, but it faces Beach. There's the Ferguson one, what we would call Ferguson One House, which is the house on Beach Street at 705 Beach. And there was the Knights of Pythias, which is down on Ash, I think 244 Ash. Those are the sites. There's a site downtown as well, but these are the sites that are in this first group area. The Milton Fields House at 726 Sumner, it's a rather modest little house, and it's I was fascinated with Milton's history. I don't know how much you know about it, but he went to law school at State University of Iowa. He's originally from St. Louis, and he married Violetta London, a graduate of the State University, and she had a teaching degree as well, but at that point in time, she couldn't teach in Waterloo because they weren't allowing Black teachers at that time. This was back in the 1920s. Milton's background was he graduated from school and went directly into the army and served in France in World War I. And the World War I only lasted until the armistice that November. So he was in France for a while, and he was one of 10 Black Army soldiers to be selected to stay on to do postgraduate work, and he did postgraduate work in London before returning back to the United States and then settling in Waterloo. He was a founder in 1921, founder of the local chapter of the NAACP. And he set up his law practice in the Hoffa building along with Dr. Ferguson in about 1928. He actually encouraged Dr. Ferguson to come to town because he felt that getting Black professionals was an important aspect of the growth of the community and support of the community. And he did get Ferguson to move to Waterloo and office on the second floor of the Hoffa building, which is in your East Commercial Historic District. Let's see what else. Oops, went too far here. He did a lot of work representing not only people from his community, and there was a lot of bootlegging going on, there was a lot of drunken driving and things like that, which were the normal kinds of things an attorney would do, but he was also doing a lot of work in civil rights, and he worked with the Fergusons when they bought their first house over on Beach Street, the Rose Hill Neighborhood Protective Association tried to, resisted them moving into the neighborhood, and Milton, of course, worked with the Fields to get that overturned so they could buy that house on Beach Street. This is that cottage, simple house that he lived in. It sort of surprised me for an attorney, but it was, it's over on the corner on Beach, but on Sumner, 726 Sumner. And he eventually moved a block away from where he was to on Sumner. I'm having trouble with this. Just a bigger house that's slightly down the block. And he passed away in 1950. But he was a character that representative of the community that I thought had probably, along with Dr. Ferguson, a great deal of impact on the civil rights. Okay. The next survey site was the Dr. Lee Ferguson and Lily Ferguson family home at 705 Beach Street. Lee was born in Texas. Lillian was born in Des Moines, grew up in Des Moines. And they both attended the University of Iowa, got married. Attorney Fields worked with getting Dr. Ferguson to share an office in the Hoffa building. And that's when and in 1929 is when Ferguson family bought their first house over at 705 Beach. And that's when the Rose Hill Neighborhood Protective Association tried to keep them out of the neighborhood. They were unsuccessful doing that. And let's see. Also at the Hoffa building was Dr. Willis came in and he was a dentist, and his wife and Willis also lived with the Fergusons for a while at 705 Beach Street. And then after basically raising their family, and the longest duration of the family together was at the Beach Street address, they moved up in 1944 to the 300 Cottage Street address, and that house was also surveyed as part of the statewide survey. So you'll have survey forms for both 507 Beach and the 600 Cottage Street. In 1948, Lee Ferguson and Fields moved their offices over to 513 Lafayette Street, and they established, along with some other professionals, Black professionals, a Black-owned savings and loan association called the Black Hawk Savings and Loan. And but unfortunately, within just 4 years of moving over there, Dr. Lee died at the age of 49. And at that time in his obituary, he was serving as the president of the Black Hawk Savings and Loan. In 1952, after some additional education, Lily Ferguson became the first African-American teacher in the Waterloo school system. I think she was over at the Grant School, correct? Then the next site we did survey on was the Elizabeth, Lizzie, and Harvey Full of Love House. Full of Love School of Music at 720 Sumner. And Lizzie and I believe her husband and her both had some music education training in Chicago. He was part of the American Music, or studied at the American Music Institute in Chicago. And she took some music courses through the Chicago University Extension Program of Music. They met 1917. They moved to Waterloo. Harvey ended up working as a welder for the Illinois Central, but he also taught music and the two of them set up a school of music. And they were officed originally down at the DAV building, which I think is the Disability American Veterans building downtown at 620 Lafayette. And then and they were involved heavily. I mean, when you do a search in the Courier for their name, the name came up almost every newspaper because they were putting on recitals and doing things at the Y. They were a very much loved family, and their house is up on Sumner at 720. It's right next to the Milton Fields house. In 1964, the School of Music was still located downtown. And then when Harvey died in the mid-60s, Lizzie moved the school up to her house on Sumner and gave lessons in the basement. She died in 1985, at the age of 90. You may notice when we get to the marker phase of this project, the part of our project was to develop historic markers around the neighborhood as we developed our surveys. And so some of these sites will be talked about a little bit more when we talk about the markers. This is the B.F. Treadwell Tourist Home, which is at 928 Beach Street. It was listed in what was called the Negro Motorist Green Book in 1939 and continued to be listed in the Green Book as a safe place for Black families to spend the night as they traveled around the country. The Green Book, by the way, was developed by a postman that lived in Harlem. And so it would have been developed a year or so before the 1939. Is that correct? I'm not sure exactly when that began, but I do know it was developed, and it turned into a travel guide for the United States, Mexico, parts of Canada, and then later the Caribbean. And let's see. And like I said, they remained listed in the Green Book as a tourist home until the final publication with the enactment of the Civil Rights Act. The date was 1967. KBBG FM radio, Jimmy Porter. He was a boy that grew up in Mississippi, and at the age of 9 was asked what he wanted in life, supposedly. Now this is what we picked up from some of the videos and interviews, that he was interested in having 3 full meals and being able to go to school. And one of his family members, a cousin of his family, gave him the opportunity to come live. He had like 8 brothers, I think, something like that. And he was given the opportunity to go live with a cousin who would allow him to go to school. And he went to school, obviously. And at the age of 17, he came to Waterloo in 1948 in search of the promised land, and said all he found was the land. Porter worked for John Deere for a while until he was laid off. And then in 1977, the Rath packing plant. He got very active in the United Packing House Workers of America Union and was eventually vice president of the union. He was a man of vision and hope and saw the radio as the most accessible means to empowerment within the African American community. And in 1977, he started working on the idea of developing the radio station. A year later, it received permission to go online, I'm not sure if that's the way to put it, but, and he first started broadcasting the following year. And in 1980, at that time they were broadcasting with 10 watts of power. And by 1980, it was up to 10,000 watts of power. So it grew fast. Then our last site in the northeast area is the Knights of Pythias Ferguson Lodge, which I assume was named after Dr. Lee Ferguson, who was a grand medical examiner in the 1920s for the organization. Milton Fields was the grand attorney. 1960, it was built as a rug cleaning plant, and eventually the Black Knights of Pythias Lodge was moved into that building. After that, the rug plant had a fire. That they're at 244 Ash Street. And there have been some famous people that went through that organization. I just put down one here, but we discuss that further in the survey report. And so that was our last site within the triangle. Then we did with the help of some of the work that Amanda Laughlin did for the statewide, she had located and did a survey for the building. It's hard to describe, but it's in the lower right-hand side of the building of the screen, where the second Union Hall was built later in 1954, but the original Union Hall, which appears in some of the pictures of the riots or whatever what's the word I'm looking? Strikes. Sorry, that were going on over at the plant. You see that building, the original hall building, which was built in 1937. And it was a restaurant, and then the union took it over. It's right across the street, right across Division Street from the administration building. I'll get this right. This building has gone through a lot of change. It's now Babe's Bar, Tavern, and but it's still there, and as you can, it's kind of hard to see, but the building is in the background here in the strike picture down at the bottom. In the middle, the National Guard was moved in 1948 around the plant. Here again is a better picture of what the building looked like when it was didn't have stucco across the front of it. And so, but it is the original building and remained the building for the union for a number of years. Then we moved to another site, our final site actually, which is the Hoffa building at 220, 222, and 224, the A.W. Hoffa block. And it's within the Waterloo East Commercial Historic District that's outlined there. As I mentioned before, in the 1927, Ferguson and Fields were both listed as having offices in the upper story. It was a building that we were looking at as possibly doing the National Register work on as an amendment to the existing historic district, but we found out that the units upstairs had been turned into housing, and we sort of backed away from it because the Historical Society, the SHPO office, wants the buildings to retain their interior integrity as well as their exterior integrity, and it lost most of that. By 1928, a third Black professional dentist, Walter Willis, moved into the second floor. He graduated from McAllister College, which is about a few blocks from where I live, and the University of Minnesota and University of Michigan. I think Fields and Lee both went to the University of Iowa. In 1943, Fields and Ferguson moved their offices to the third floor of a commercial building a few blocks away, and that's where they established the Black Hawk Savings and Loan Association. But most of the time between 28 and 43, they were upstairs at the Hoffa. Okay, here are getting back to the northeast area. Here are the sites of the historic markers that are in progress of being made and hopefully will be put up shortly. And I have someone here that could tell you a little bit more about each of those.
Hello. My name is Micah Lee Anders. This is loud. And this is Gar Patterson. And we worked on the marker component of the project. Our background is in research and design and history. So that was really exciting for us to work on this part. So as you can see, the markers that we've selected to place, we've done 7. Here are 6 of them: East High, the AME Church, which is the tiny little church on the corner, Ferguson Fields Park, Follow Up School of Music, the Treadwell Tourist Home, KBBG Radio, and then also on the Hoffa Building downtown. For the Treadwell Tourist Home, it's the only tourist home that's still standing of the few that were listed in the Green Book. So even on the marker, we make sure to recognize the other couple that were in existence before. And in the later issues of the Green Book, there were actually 2 hotels? 2 hotels. And so we made sure to name them on the marker as well. So although the marker is placed in a certain location, sometimes the content goes beyond just that specific location to tell a more in-depth story. I would love for you to say something.
One of the things that came up in our conversations with so many of the Waterloo community who generously shared their stories and their memories of the civil rights history of the city were all of the businesses, all of the entrepreneurial energy that couldn't be tagged to an extant property. And because the history of tourist homes, as documented in the Green Book, is a history of entrepreneurial zeal and drive and dedication, and often the drive and dedication and the energy and the labor of women. So this was an important place, we thought, to honor and recognize.
Thank you. Okay. The only other thing we were going to say about that was another thing we heard from a lot of community was we didn't have our own buildings. We didn't have our own businesses. The beauty shop was in the basement, or things like that. So it was really important to recognize homes as businesses as well, which is partly why the radio station and the Fullerlip School of Music were selected. Here's an example of one of the markers. This marker is actually slightly different than all the others. It's going in the park. It's 3 foot by 3 foot square. The others are all 3 foot by 2 foot. They're being made by Public Works here. It was really important to us to have a really great partnership because we're not here to do the maintenance. We're not here if there's any issues. Oh, hello. And we wanted to make sure the install went really smoothly. And so it was important to make it a really good collaborative experience. Originally, if you'd seen earlier versions, these did have a place for photos. We weren't able to find high resolution photos for every single property, and we didn't want that to become a distinction that made some look more important than others, and so we made the decision to not have that on any. It actually allowed more space for text too, which was kind of nice trade-off. We chose to use the colors that were suggested to us by, I believe, the committee here. So we wanted to make sure to honor those colors, and we chose to have red be the prominent color because we've seen a lot of the other signs in downtown Waterloo and other areas have that prominent red. So we wanted this to fit in really nicely with what's already happening in town, but also, you know, be a really nice stop and look and reflect moment. Just a quick graphic design note. We chose to have multiple font sizes, so people who are driving can have an experience. People who have the opportunity to stop from walking or biking would also be able to have a more in-depth experience. But we wanted to give something to everybody who was passing by at whatever type of transit they were using. Thank you.
I just wanted, again, to acknowledge and thank the many community members of Waterloo, the staff of the library, Waterloo's Public Library, the staff of the Grout Museum, and also Waterloo Neighborhood Services and the Department of Public Works. So thank you all. Thank you for your commitment to this project.
As part, you know, this also shows there is a marker that was going downtown on the Hoffa building, and we're working through whether that's going to be on the building or on the wall, and that's still an issue, but the others are going to be freestanding, it's my understanding, freestanding sign. Oh yeah, there's an example.
So that's at Best Chapel, but that's just sort of a mock-up that I made with a photo I'd taken earlier.
How'd that get up there? It's not in the program. There's magic going on in this room. Okay. Well, that's good. I can stand magic. Also, as part of the contract, we were asked to do a National Register designation or National Register amendment to an existing historic district or site. And we started working on the administration building and at the Rath. And we went through a number of, a few drafts of it. And if Bethany wants to come up, she can tell you more about it. She did most of the work on that component.
How come it has to go so much shorter for me? So yes, as Tom mentioned, there needed to be a National Register amendment or at least a amendment or nomination prepared for this as part of this. And we went back and forth a lot actually on that topic. When we first proposed, we thought, well, clearly Martin Luther King Jr. stayed in the Russell Lamson Hotel, slam dunk, there we go, we're done. And though the Russell Lamson's an amazing project now with its apartments and such, we thought that actually that was not appropriate. We really wanted to tell the story of the community here and how that grows. And that's been something throughout as I back up through this project. Because there were other people studying the statewide study and the intensive survey of the triangle, we were able to spend a lot more time digging deeper into people's stories, having interviews that the marker team did, looking at buildings that maybe were a little bit more overlooked. Maybe when you were looking at the survey sites that we were doing, you're like, well, that's kind of a modest house. And I'm really pleased with how this story is really telling the story of the average community member in Waterloo. So with that in mind, we wanted to tell the story as we looked at what we would be talking about for a National Register nomination of the big story of unions in Waterloo and how the union and the integrated union was so important to the development of the RAF and to civil rights in Waterloo following that. And we honestly thought that an amendment to the RAF administration building was an important way to tell that story. That got a little bit of raised eyes at the State Historic Preservation Office at first, who said, well, that's the administration, you're talking about the union. And we said, yes, but if the union wasn't fighting against the administration in that, then there wouldn't be a story here. If everything was all hunky-dory, we wouldn't have had these issues. So we have proposed a couple of pieces and a couple of revisions through the State Historic Preservation Office. We have a nomination put together that I think really thoroughly tells that story. Our biggest concern in that is, as you guys well know, that the current integrity of the RAF administration building is not strong. Tom took some interior photos today. It was very easy for him to get in to take interior photos. That's also perhaps not the best element of it. And that may end up being a problem with its nomination, but we really think that this tells the story, and I think when you guys get that sent off to you in our following things, I think you'll see that as well. There could be the chance that that story is moved across to the original Union Hall on Division Street, the Babe's Tap building. But I think that there's been enough of a loss of integrity in there, and having sat at that bar to have a couple of beers, I'm not completely sure that the owner of Babe's Tap is. I think he's interested in the history of his building, but I don't necessarily think he's interested in being a National Register site. I could be wrong. We did have some other strong contenders for National Register nominations in Waterloo. The Ferguson House at 705 Beach Street, so that house that they lived in for much of their lives, is something that we also think would be a really strong contender. As a private home, that would have to have approval of the residents, so that's possibly what's holding us up there. We do believe strongly in that and would be interested in possibly, Tom may throw something at me, but we've even discussed among ourselves the possibility of doing that as kind of a pro bono follow-up to this. We really became fascinated with the story of the Fergusons and the relationship with the Fields and the other early leaders. What is, I think, still believe, Hopewell Baptist or Best Church or the Railroad Chapel is also a really strong contender. That story of that church and what it's done in this community is really important. But again, due to the current integrity since last year's fire, we're a little concerned about that. Just as we came in, Lexi handed us the letter that we'd sent out to check their interest, and it was returned to sender. So I don't know that that's a path that we can follow at this point. That said, the survey forms that we did and the other ISAF forms that Amanda Laughlin did do bring up the possibility of any number of National Register nominations in the future, should you guys want to. There is a very rich history of those elements that could be pursued. Our other recommendations include the markers, clearly, and work with interpretation of that. We would think that you should investigate a multiple property listing or some kind of element for the city's black churches. Maybe it's some kind of citywide recognition because they've been so important in the history of this. Again, a lot of those buildings have changed or become bigger or they're newer, but that is a continuity of history that we think is really important. Anything else from that? We've got most of the National Register nomination completed, but did want to come and talk to you first and also get those photos because it might be a little hairy as we submit it, but I think we should. Look, it's much taller now.
Yeah. How do I get the power back to me on the screen?
It's still on you, it's just on that one.
Oh.
Yeah, they're two different.
You can see this one, right? Okay, that's great. The right direction here. One of the things we discovered, as I mentioned or alluded to in the beginning, was that when we started this project in 2018, going into 19, Amanda Laughlin was doing a statewide project, and she was just finishing up for surveys of major buildings or major significant buildings in the neighborhood that we were also studying at the same time, thinking we were going to use them, but she beat us to the, and we found out about it later, that she had done the Ferguson House on Cottage, 600 Cottage. She had done the second version of the Union Hall that was all made possible by the success of the little Union Hall. It was just on the same block, but further, she was on, that was on Sycamore. And she did East High School, it was all done in 2019. And what's the fourth one?
She did the
What is it? Okay. And so anyway, this is a map of the sites in the neighborhood that she did. And we have copies of those, and we will be forwarding those to the city along with it. She did also, I think I mentioned this, a multiple property nomination that was that had quite a few survey forms that went across the state in the Black History Study. And I put this map together to show you all the things that are going on around the Northeast Triangle. And it shows the work that we did in blue, the work that Amanda did in kind of the more rosy color, and the location of all the markers. So it's a pretty good coverage of the community. I guess that's the last screen we have. If you had any questions, we'd be happy to entertain them.
Thank you, Tom. I
Sure.
really appreciate the work that you and your team have done. Definitely know this is hard work, especially through a pandemic. So cheers to you. Yeah, cheers to you to continue that. I definitely would like to ask the commissioners if there are any questions that anybody has. Then we'll open up to public comment, and then we'll give commissioners a chance to have final comments here. But any questions anybody has?
I don't have a question, but I do have a couple of comments. I'm really concerned about places like the Jesse Cosby Center, Raths. I think it's good with the Ferguson family. They definitely have a history here. I'm concerned about East High School. East High School was a desegregation school for the entire Waterloo Community School District. So just saying on 1968, whatever, is not sufficient to me personally. The other thing that concerns me is Reverend Bess, who fought against the horrible film, Birth of a Nation. These are the things that are historic to me. They fit in with buildings, certainly, but more importantly, it's people who have pushed these attempts at making this a more equal society. And I'm not getting that when I'm looking at, listening to, or reading any of this information. And that's critical to me. Also with Rath, I mean, this is history that I don't know who you talk to or when, or I just don't understand, but Rath Packing Company was, at that time, one of the largest packing companies in the world, not in Iowa, in the world. My father was the first Black steward, what you now call trustees or those terms, in Raths, okay? So this is near and dear to me in a lot of ways. He also made it possible for women to receive equal pay at Rath Packing Company. These are stories that I was thinking was going to come up out of this. And instead, I'm seeing addresses in 2 or 3 sentences about this, that, or the other that is not indicative of the strength of people in Waterloo, not just the blacks fighting for equal rights, but for the Caucasians who were fighting along with us. And I find that disturbing, and I just find it disturbing.
Let me say a couple things. East High School was done by Amanda. The form work is done by Amanda, and we didn't do that, so we didn't talk about that. We didn't downplay it, but the survey form is already completed for that project.
Well, it was in the packet that we reviewed, that I reviewed anyway, unless people got different ones. East High School was listed in there, so I'm assuming
As a
that
marker, there was a marker.
As a marker.
As a marker,
So-
which was like 4 paragraphs and 2 sentences per paragraph, yeah. But the full development of the history of the importance of the school is in the survey form, and that was done by Amanda Laughlin.
So,
And what we presented today were just highlights of forms that have a whole development of the history, which you'll get. That's part of the process. What you saw today was just a bullet point presentation
I
of
understand that.
highlights.
I understand bullet point presentations. That's not a problem for me.
Yeah.
My problem is that if this is just a highlight of it, there's still critical information that would have made it more appealing in terms of the history of this city, of Black people who have put time, effort, and lives on the line. And none of that is there, so I'm not sure how you or who you went to. I work at the library a lot. I get a lot of information from the library, so I know that the information is there. My concern is that it's just not, it hasn't given a lot of people who deserve consideration in here any consideration. And they were in significant
Well,
positions in this community.
okay.
I'm not trying to get involved in a debate. I'm just saying how I feel about it.
Well, you'll see the full forms and the development of the history in each of the forms incomplete. So is that safe to say? Or?
That, and I think but your points are well taken and a good way to review everything that we've put together, particularly with the RAF nomination, which is long and I believe tells a lot of the stories, but I'd like to look at it with that eye again, to be honest. I've worked a lot over it in the past several years in the piece of the story, but you're right. It was an enormous story and of so many people, and particularly of women. Now, the SHPO pulled me back a little bit about women's history with the RAF, and they're like, you can't tell that story too. So I had to touch a little bit on the bacon slicing division and so on and so forth. But
Well, I think you might add it this way. It wasn't about women. It was about workers. Workers.
it was about Black women, and let's be really clear about that division and how hard those women had to work.
And how they got overlooked.
Yes.
Yeah. And
I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you please come to the microphone?
I would say one thing too to note as I understand this process, and Bethany's really the expert on this, but oftentimes in a nomination process, you're guided to what will pass a nomination, for say historic preservation for a state nomination or a National Register nomination. And there are times when you want to tell one story and they say, yeah, well, that actually might take away from our ability to get you past that nomination. Not to say that those stories don't get told, just to say that sometimes they are guided. Am I kind of expressing that correctly? To a certain extent. And so, that's just another thing to consider as you look over the full nomination and the full survey forms, that many of those stories are there. But, that they are there to serve a particular goal, which is getting a National Register nomination. Am I making sense? to a certain
Perhaps
extent?
to you, I'm not talking about a nomination. I'm
all right.
talking about history of
No,
our
I
city with
get-
our
I get that.
people.
I get
That's,
that,
that's
yeah.
my concern, not the nomination.
Yeah.
That's just a little part of it.
I got you.
Any other questions for our fellow commissioners?
I do have one thing. I think Tom kind of alluded to this, but the situation earlier this month, Main Street's Design Council had a meeting and reviewed the signage for the Hoffa building, and there were some concerns as far as the size and location of where it's going to be located. I think preference would be to be on the building itself, and also the size seemed to be a little bit larger than what would be necessary for that kind of a location.
So that brings me up to my questions that I've asked several times about how we are installing the signs. I love the signs. I like the graphic aspect of it. What I don't like is the street sign pole. I know that's a mock-up, but I really think we're doing a disservice to the history if we put a street sign pole up. I think this needs to be a monument type thing. I know we've talked about it numerous times. I don't know what the city's plan for it is, but I think we really need to investigate how that's being put up. I hate how that looks.
I do too.
I would like something more that's cohesive with the signage that we have throughout downtown and throughout the rest of Waterloo, with the nice black metal stanchion, if you will, for all these signs. I think that's what will create a cohesive flow from sign to sign to sign. This, even though it's a mock-up, I don't want this to be the idea that we have of how we're going to install them.
Like a bus stop. Is this the idea of the public works, I'm assuming?
This is just a mock-up. I don't think there's been quite discussion on it, but I just want us probably to be very clear that maybe your vision too, you can speak to that, of kind of how you think they should be installed, maybe a bit more than that pole.
Yeah. Oh, are we? No, we are still on.
That mic loves you.
Well, no, that's okay. So, right now, part of it is how many signs for how much money. It's the game, right? So, and who would be installing it and how would it be installed? So this is where we are right now. We've talked to Public Works about having them be black. So that's sort of where we've started, and they've said that that is optional. They were getting pricing for us on having them be black poles. We've talked about what would it look like to have an aluminum frame, but it comes down to budget.
Well, 100%.
Yeah.
I think unfortunately, some of our city staff has left. I think we just need to have a further conversation, because you guys did great work. So I want to be able to celebrate that work and to be able to celebrate the history of Waterloo with something that represents that.
I
Yeah.
think this metal pole makes it look cheap.
Right.
That one's better, yes. But again, it's a mock-up. I just want to make sure that as a council, we put forward our voice. This is kind of what we're looking for, to highlight both the sign and the history. I know it seems odd that the pole is the main contention here.
No,
but
we've talked about it internally as well. So that's what
Okay,
I'm saying. We've
perfect.
already, that's why we said, could we do black poles? And I did just want to say one other thing specifically about Reverend Bess. On his marker, our original version had Birth of a Nation. For space, we took it off. But we did, if I can just read you what we wrote on his marker, if you're interested. Only if you're interested. Oh, okay.
If you took off Birth of a Nation, no, I'm no longer,
Okay.
I'm not interested.
Okay, the rest is
That's
about
him.
his work fighting for racial rights and against racial restrictions and things like that. But I hear what you're saying in terms of that was really a key point that he had in the city.
He almost lost his life. So, I'm into reality, even though the reality of this country, this city, this state is not always a good reality. The fact is, if we never address these things, they'll never be addressed.
I had a question regarding the pole, the signage. Are they dual side? Okay, dual side. Great.
Yep, same thing, both sides.
Okay.
So if people are coming from either side, they're able to experience it.
We've only seen just a flat paper kind of mock-up, so it really doesn't kind of give us the texture? Is there like a reflector yellow, or how would you, if it was dark outside, does this sign not, does it distract? Does it count? How does that look if there's a
So
night?
we haven't gotten to
exterior?
see a mock-up
Okay.
yet either. We've
Okay.
gotten a scale mock-up, so we know the size that was sent to us. When we talked with Public Works, and please fill in anything for me. When we talked with Public Works, we talked about what material it would be on, and it would be on sort of that standard sign blank. So to your point of, does it look like a bus stop, which is what I heard somebody say. But it is bigger, so it has size in its favor. But I didn't get an answer per se on the reflectiveness. I did ask, but it was kind of to see, we had to get further down in the process to get to that level of detail.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Do you have a preference one way or the other? I think that would be the other piece.
Yeah, I think it's probably beyond my preference, and it might actually have to be a traffic thing. So that's kind of why I'm not really wanting to make any suggestions, but I definitely would like to know, especially because I do know there are opportunities where signs can kind of have a little glow to them. So even at night, you can still see them. I think it just sets a really tone in neighborhoods that, for instance, this neighborhood, you may not see a street light. So you can only view the tour before sundown, and we've already experienced sundown.
We don't want any
towns
sundown,
in
anything, no.
this environment.
no.
So it's kind of really I would say critical to just have an option, especially for those that may have any type of visual impairment, et cetera. I'll open for any other questions commissioners may have.
I just had one more comment. I'm wondering if we take the survey that they have, and to Terry's point, we just use the information that they're going to give us and use some of our social media and the city website. And maybe this is the beginning of the story. Maybe we, on our part, we tell the story a little bit further with Terry's help, your help, this library's help, and just kind of start there and just kind of build on that. Because I know there's a lot.
Yeah.
Terry, you and we've had a little bit of a conversation about that. So maybe we can just keep the story going and use some of those outlets that isn't necessarily a consultant or anything like that, but we just build on it. We've talked about create a historic preservation Facebook and stuff like that. And maybe that's what we look at doing to be able to continue the story a little bit more, to highlight all that stuff that maybe might not be in this one survey, but just to keep going.
And that's one of the questions that I had, because I just want to piggyback on that, Nick. Speaking with Tom, really thinking about the recommendations. I don't know if anybody's open. I know you want to provide written recommendations, but are you open to maybe kind of what's the next step for this project? Because we definitely know that it's not complete. And what would be an ideal next step for us as a commission, or an ideal next step for the public to get themselves prepared for? Because as you can start to see, the unrest starts to really feel unglued when you're so connected, and your own personal experience is connected to some of the storytelling here. Would anybody be open to speaking to that?
You read my mind. I don't know if you were sitting quietly behind us at single speed or something as we ate lunch before we came here, but that was actually one of the topics that we've been discussing in this. It's both fulfilling as a consultant to come into someplace and do a study, but then you've got that what next. And the one in my written remarks about the next steps, the final thing that I didn't discuss because it didn't tie to National Register nominations were the what next about the ongoing interpretation. You've had a lot of museums type ideas, the railroad car, the Dunsmore House, some elements in the grout. I'd love to see how the city could work with those exhibits to really keep expanding that and have that so much more open and tell those stories. The social media element was something that we discussed. Keep these stories. This is just a very basic start in some of the ways that these are represented through place. But as you know, a lot of those places aren't here anymore, and that's been our challenge since the beginning. How do you represent the empty lot? That was where Mrs. So-and-so was doing this and made sure that that block stayed together and stayed as a community that could do these things. Those are really hard because you can't even put up a marker or anything like that, or somebody says, well, that was just, some lady that lived there just telling the neighborhoods what to do. Well, those are the stories that are the things that are inspiring moving things forward. And that's, again, our charge to you, and we'd love to give some ideas or some examples. I like to say to groups that I work with, that they never get rid of me. I'm looking forward to the next few years of watching those social medias, to come down here when we drive down to New Orleans for Thanksgiving every year. We now stop in Waterloo every time and kind of look around and see what's going on. Somebody catches me tramping through Eddie B's cottages, looking to see if anything's happened over there. So that's really the next step in this, and I'm really excited to see what you guys do.
Thank you. I also want to add on a little bit to that. As I mentioned, there were surveys going on before and during our first year here we were unaware of. I don't think the city was aware of them. I became aware of them when I talked to Amanda, who was thanking us for the work we were doing that was helping feed into the statewide program. In fact, in the statewide program analysis, they said that the RATH should be considered for an amendment to the National Register nomination to acknowledge what was going on with regards to civil rights at the plant. So we have the work that we're doing and have done. The first Union Hall across the street, which is a full write-up too, and we have Amanda's full write-up of the Union Hall down the street on Sycamore. And these, I guess the important thing is that everybody get on the same page as far as what we have to begin with and put that together into one package. And so I was talking to John a little before the meeting that I'd be sending, I have all of Amanda's work. And I have been in contact with her about what she did in the city. And I'll be sending all that to the city. So you'll be able to look at and see what she said about the high school and what she said about the Fergusons when they lived on Cottage Street. So, so all the pieces have to fit together. And before we jump to any conclusions, I would hope that we would be able to combine all that information and see. And she did the best church too. So I'm sure she talked about that Birth of a Nation story in her work, but we didn't do it because it had already been done. So, okay, that's my 2 cents.
Any additional comments or questions for commissioners? I'd like to open it up for any public comments. Please, go ahead, Ed.
I was here to give the drought report, but this sort of ties in.
Okay.
I know the drought's been having people come over and work on stories, from the African-American community and some more things. We've had our oral history for years, and I know there's a lot of folks, like veterans, that we never heard anything from them, but like what Cherry was saying, I think those people, someplace, we should hear about it. Also, rather than just having a sign, is there anything on the internet about all these places, or can you get a thing when you go around? I was in Oak Park, Illinois, and did some of the Frank Lloyd Wright, stuff. And there's an area right around where his workshop, where you can get like, sound boxes. The houses are all private. You don't get to, other than the Wright House, you don't necessarily get to go inside, but they tell about the people that live there. And I'm just thinking if we could do something like that, whether it was a DVD or you could stream it and bring it to life. My kids went to public school here, and they were involved in this program where you got to pick somebody you liked. My son picked Walt Disney, and my daughter picked Amelia Earhart. But they played the people, they got dressed up and everything else. I think possibly we could consider having some reenactors and make this a bigger thing than just a damn sign, because we really have to, get people involved. Since I'm up, I'm just going to give my spiel from the grout. We are having our historic homes on August 26th. We also have a new, and I hope people can go on that. There's 6 different residences. We also have a new exhibit about how Waterloo really became involved in World War II, and various factories here producing things for the war effort. I know Rath was probably making food and rations and everything else. Deershank, switched over. We had Chamberlain's. And I'm sure there's probably people that, had ancestors if you lived here for a while, either here or other places, but I think that's just something we need to see. My last comment, and this is just me speaking, I'm not speaking for the route. I don't know what happened with the birth of the nation, but I'm damn sick and tired of all this crap about trying to hide the truth, whether it's from the governor of Iowa or the governor of Florida. And we should be very proud because, you know, the author of the 1619 Project is from here. And I'm not woke, I just like to tell the whole truth.
Yeah.
And so,
I appreciate that, Ed. Yeah, tell the whole truth and give the whole report. I love that.
and you
Really
know,
appreciate that.
don't back down, but give us some facts.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Commissioners, any other questions or comments? Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment or would like to approach? I'll ask you to approach the podium. We'll give you a few minutes here to speak. Please introduce yourself, your name. If you're a Waterloo resident, that'd be great for us to know.
My name is Tim Coolman, and I used to live in Waterloo, but I moved to Cedar Falls a few years ago. But I grew up in this area. So it's important for me to think about the history of Waterloo being preserved. And I agree with Terry that it'd be nice to have more information available for people to look at. And I know that in a previous board meeting that you had, you talked about maybe having a QR code on each of those signs. That might work with what Ed is talking about, so that someone could just click on that and then get more information. So that's not just simply what's on that board that you're looking at, to fill out the rest of the information. Thank you. That's what I want to say.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. Is there anybody else from the public? Please approach the podium, state your name, and if you're a Waterloo resident, we'd love to know that.
Charles Pearson, 726 Logan Avenue. On one end, I kind of like what Zahn did. Me and him had a conversation a while back about the civil rights project they was doing. And I understood when it comes to creating an inventory like that and trying to get it right, especially in like Waterloo, Iowa, that's like a tough task. And the reason why I say that, we don't have a historical society in Waterloo, right? Blackhawk County doesn't have a historical society. So it's some things that they might be familiar with when it comes to doing projects like that as a consultant, and we just don't have that. Two, I put a lot of blame on the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs. I put a lot of blame on the State Historical Society, the Iowa Economic Development Authority. And the reason why I say it like that is because we should have more Black preservation partners. Y'all got to kind of hear what I just said. You should have more Black preservation partners. You need more African-American property owners to be partners in preservation. Never in the history of our state we have Black preservation partners, right? So I think that's the big one. If you talk about the city of Waterloo, you're going to be having preservation partnerships with Black property owners. We have generational wealth in our Black community. We got properties that you guys was just talking about that go way back. When y'all was talking about the chapel, that's where our family was married at. We one of the original settler families in the history of the city. And so that church, you're absolutely right, that could be nominated. I think the other part is y'all never talked about Sparks. Rebecca Sparks did the survey of Smoky Row. She told the Preservation Commission specifically that you're going to need a second survey, right? There's no way Zion and them should not have known that. They talked about all the surveys, but they didn't talk about the big one. The big one is when you look at the triangle, the survey should also go past Cottage. It never went past Cottage, right? So then if we go past Cottage, now you're talking about Unity neighborhood, you're talking about Gates Park, so on and so on. But I think the bigger one is you're going to need a third survey to talk about the north end, right? So right now, like the little triangle piece right there, or let's say the piece that they have right there, that's been surveyed. Rebecca basically said that based on her survey, that's the history of white immigrants. So if you're European and you was born and raised in the city of Waterloo, Iowa, that's where you came from, right? So when it came to Rebecca's survey, she was paid to make it a Black survey. She wasn't paid to talk about white people. She was paid, she was kind of forced into it where a lot of the properties that are altered, you can't, I had that same conversation with Paul Moore, Steve King, and them. If the state of Iowa, if the majority of our African-American properties and resources are altered, does that mean we are instantly eliminated from being significant? And honestly, you can't be, because there's two things you gotta look at. Are we doing architectural projects or are we doing significant projects? We have that choice, right? So if they chose to do architectural projects, our Black community is eliminated, right? But if they look at our project and look at our significance, now we're doing something big. What's even bigger than that, you have 99 counties in the history of the state of Iowa, right? The first 45 counties were abolitionists from Northeast Iowa. The first 45 counties were civil rights activists from Europe. The first 45 counties all reached out to people that were from other countries that was trying to fight for their civil rights before Black people even had a platform in the state of Iowa. The other 45 counties, Black Hawk County, was named after a person that supported the Confederacy, Chief Black Hawk. So when it comes to the history of the United States of America, you talk about Chief Black Hawk, you're talking about a Native American that supported the Confederacy compared to the Meskwaki that supported the Union, right? And so when you look at the 45 counties, the second 45 counties of the history of our state, white supremacy, white supremacist, systematic racism, right? So when we talk about that location, Smoky Row was a location that was developed by the Illinois Central Railroad. It was a location where the railroad company could tax you. So the industry was so greedy here. Thinking, when y'all talk about Rad Packing Company, when you talk about John Deere, when you talk about the Illinois Central Railroad, those were the people that abused the white immigrants. Before Black immigrants even got here, that's where all the civil rights activity was going, because when it came to unionism, that's where it started. The same location is where the Sullivan family. So if you ever heard of Tom Sullivan or Alita Sullivan, or if you ever seen Sullivan Park, guess what? They lost their property because of redlining. And so it's a lot that we missed. I think the big one is, I gave you guys a document, I want to say back in 2017, 2016. The city partnered with me and this same commission, there go Ed right there, Ed took the tour. We did an inventory of all the city civil rights sites. Not just Black sites, the city properties. So I'll give you a great example. This building we live in, right? I mean, we're having our meeting in right now. Somebody got hung in it. A Black male got hung in this exact building, right? And so the crazy part about it is Anime Weems went and got the Black community like it was something stupid, like it was Wakanda. This whole thing was flooded with our Black community in front of this building. Why? Because they said this dude didn't hang himself. Somebody did it, and somebody's gonna pay for what they did. So because of that situation, I want to say a year or two later, we got the Human Rights Commission. Because of that, right? So now when you look at the history of the Human Rights Commission, which is in the Carnegie Library, Andrew Carnegie, the city of Waterloo, we're the only city in America that got 2 Carnegie Libraries. Why? Because racism was so powerful, right? It was just overwhelming. And a lot of it was amongst the immigrants. It wasn't just the Black community immigrants. But if you look at one Carnegie Library, that's where Martin Luther King Jr. became a member of the Waterloo Public Library. If you look at the other Carnegie Library, that's where our Human Rights Commission is at. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King's first visit to our state was Waterloo. If we carved Waterloo out and put it anywhere south, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We'd be part of a $60 billion tourism industry, right? We'd be in a situation where when it comes to our sites and our destinations, people pay millions and millions of dollars to see that every year. So the situation we're in right now, Out of 99 counties, this is the last black community out of 99 counties. We're the last one standing. You know what they're talking about on the state level? Damn, how the hell they still don't got one property on the United States now? How long has this commission been here? I mean, dang, y'all on the commission. Whatever the answer is, Waterloo, Iowa, still doesn't have one black property on the United States Register of Historic Places. And we have models. Iowa City, great model. What they did when it comes to historic preservation. The state capitol, the city of Des Moines, they're a great model. Some of the stuff they've done. Cedar Rapids, they're a great model. Some of the stuff they've done. So on my end, I think Zion, if I had to grade them, I'd give them a D+. That'd be me, right? Now, what I'm thinking is we need to figure out how many of you guys know what we did already. We got a total of 45 sites, right? We took the tour. Ed went on the tour. We had a huge award ceremony. We had a great project. When it comes to the Iowa Civil Rights Trail, Waterloo's supposed to be the hub of it, right? We want tourists to get our experience when it comes to civil rights. You have a place called Our Lady Victory Academy. It's right across, it's like the Catholic Church right here. You had these Catholic nuns that we've never talked about in the history of civil rights. And these nuns raised millions and millions of dollars for people like Jimmy Porter, for people like the Masons and all those other people like that. And we have never acknowledged how the nuns contributed to civil rights. You was talking about Jesse Cosby Center. Jesse Cosby Center was built by the Diocese of Dubuque. It was actually called St. Peter's Claver. And the diocese is like, when are we going to teach people our piece in this? So on my end, I think we need to somehow, like I think what he said, somehow we jail our piece. The city, we already have a piece. Y'all wasn't around. Some of y'all wasn't around, right? We have the greatest story that's never been told in the history of civil rights. Our story is not the South. The South is more slavery, Underground Railroad, plantations. Our story is the history of industrialization. Our story is the factory city. Our story is 20th century African-American Negro railroad community. That's our story. And if we get it right, tourism will go to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I really appreciate that. History lesson, your thoughts and opinions. One of the things that it really brings to my attention right now, just kind of looking at our power as a commission, is to really be effective in how we approach such a huge body of work, right? We're a volunteer commission. We need the expertise and support of the technical folks that are out here in the audience that are doing the work. And I just wanted to just share with our commissioners, and whether we take this up in a vote in another meeting, I do think there's room to exercise our powers to maybe enact some type of a task force that can maybe look at furthering along this work around civil rights history here in Waterloo. I'm bringing that to the attention to actually make it for the record and not just to be having comment here. But if anybody wants to speak to that, I'm open to that, but it is a power that is enumerated in our ordinance as well as in our bylaws, and I just wanted to take that up as consideration as we kind of wind down the hearing and look at maybe possible next steps here. I'm open to any thoughts, fellow commissioners, final comments, and then we'll go ahead and close our hearing. Are we taking a vote on this, Ed, or are we just listening to their presentation? I couldn't remember. Yeah,
I think we'd have to have a motion to approve the study.
Yeah.
For the commission. Is that correct? We don't need a vote, right?
Yeah, we don't need a vote to listen.
Perfect.
That's what
That's
I
even
thought.
better.
Yeah. But again, my final comment is that we actually get active in this. And again, that task force doesn't have to be solely commissioners. It could be made up of an enumerated body of folks that are both interested, public, professional and our technical folks. But I do appreciate the technical support that was offered, the work that Tamazan and his partners that they presented today, and I'll leave final comment to my fellow commissioners if you have anything to say.
I have a couple things. We're obviously going to get the survey stuff, right, to review, I'm assuming? Okay. And then I see Charles left, but I'm assuming he always says he has all the work done. Are we able to see his work that he's done? I would appreciate that as we look to maybe do a task force. I think it's important to at least get what people have. I don't know. That's my thoughts.
Appreciate that. Any other comments here?
I would actually move right now, today, why put it off, that we establish a task force with our commission and other people in the community who might be interested, and keep in mind people that have been working on our behalf. I think that would be a good thing to do.
Any discussion, or is there a second on that motion? I got a second on that motion. Any further discussion? Again, it's enumerated in section 985 as far as commission powers and duties, if you want to kind of look at the authority that speaks to that. But it gives us right, and we can kind of carve out in the next meeting sort of what that looks like. But I think it is an appropriate next step, especially to both honor the work that has been done before us and the work that is still yet to be done. Without any additional discussion, I'll definitely take a vote on establishing a task force around Waterloo and its civil rights histories and properties and inventories. Any clarity on the motion, I'll go ahead and clarify. Otherwise, I'll ask for all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, that motion carries. Definitely, Lexi, let's please add that to further discussion. I really appreciate that. Again, thank you, Tamazan and Associates. Again, I really appreciate your work, and I know it's really hard to do the historical research because it's almost uncovering a lot of things that have been buried, and sometimes that means our hearts and our minds. And so I really appreciate the thick skin that you carry today, and I just want to be effective in how we continue to manage this work that needs to be done, this body of work that be done. And I'm going to take you up on that offer as far as being our next best friend, and we will definitely be in touch and be open to your further recommendations and written reports.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to do the work. We enjoyed it, and it was just an amazing experience for us as well. And it was a learning experience as well, in the sense that we were finding things that were hidden, and a lot of information that didn't always fit together quite right. You know, once you start reading the newspapers, you find interpretations being different from different ones about different projects. So it was a very good experience for us as well, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. That closes our hearing. I appreciate the work that you've done. Thank you again for your travels. Be safe on your return, and we welcome you back to Waterloo, okay? Thank you. Kind of leaning back into our agenda. It looks like right now we don't have any additional. Go ahead.
One discussion item
Okay.
you want to talk about was the National Trust Conference.
Oh, yeah, great. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
You're awesome, Lexi. National Trust for Historic Preservation puts on an annual conference, the Pass Forward Conference. This year, it is probably going to be the first time that it's actually been in person since the pandemic. They've always offered both this virtual or hybrid option for the last couple years. I thought it would be great to just put that on the agenda and to be aware on the awareness for our fellow commissioners. Lexi, the dates are November. Did you?
I did not look.
Okay,
I know you said it was in Washington, D.C., and
Yep.
that does sound familiar.
Yep, it's in Washington, D.C., and I have the dates here. It is November 5th through November 6th through the 10th. So the first full week in November. Again, opportunity to get more involved. Again, as a part of our annual report, it is some type of an education. If you weren't able to attend our Iowa conference back in June, I do encourage fellow commissioners to participate and attend, if that's optional, if that's your pleasure. But thank you for that reminder. Any other additional discussion items or questions? Ed, are you comfortable with your report that you gave?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Any other reports or anything that anybody has to share or would like to share? Awesome. Well, I would definitely solicit a motion to adjourn our meeting today.
A motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Second.
All right. All in favor? We're good.
Aye.
So approved. Thank you.